First they're going to talk to me and then set me up Apple?
Their earbuds are just approved by earbuds.
I have earbuds. You can use them as...
They might be the new earbuds.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah, so it's more research, right? And I'm Costco, and so yeah, there's so many different types of grades.
Knox several times.
And they told me when they first made the original one.
It's really a picture of you.
They said a lot of people in Costco, and this is UCSF, so, you know, they're being, honest, fair. 250. Awesome. Oh, I wanted to tell you what I kept thinking about. If they were. But it really depends on each person. When we were talking about armchair, I have these books of John Wood, who, and I can't throw them away because I love John Wood. And I have a picture in my mind of John Wood with one Lou Wilson. And he's like this big giant thing. This little tiny, but they loved each other. I thought, when I go to Seminary, I go, oh, this is a good sparkles at the tables.
the Programs Administrator here at Mechanics Institute. I see a lot of familiar faces and some folks who I hope are new to our space. And I want to encourage everyone, since we're a bit of an intimate group tonight, if folks would like to move on forward, we have plenty of empty seats in the front. If you prefer to stay in the back, no worries. But we have a nice opportunity this evening to really be kind of up close and up front with the authors that we have here tonight. I am pleased to welcome back the WNBA, the Women's National Book Association here in San Francisco, who has been an ongoing partner of ours here at Mechanics Institute and has put together a number of fabulous panels, including tonight's panel, Stranger Fiction, the Art of Speculative Fiction and World Building. Before we start, I want to talk a bit about some upcoming programs that we have here at Mechanics. Our ongoing film series, Cinema Lit, which happens every Friday night, is continuing this month with Members' Choice. So you are welcome to join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. for Black Narcissus. Then looking towards next week, we have a program on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. with Dr. Paul Whitney, who is a professor emeritus at the UCSF School of Psychiatry, and he will be talking about the differences between harm reduction and abstinence treatment when it comes to substance use disorders. So that's going to be a particularly relevant conversation here in downtown San Francisco, and we are very pleased to have them. Now I will hand off the mic to Elise Collins, who is the president of the Women's National Book Association, and she will talk a little bit more about the WNBA and the speakers we have tonight. Welcome, Elise.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Elise Marie Collins, and I'm president of Women's National Book Association. It's an honor to be here tonight and to see some familiar and also new faces. We are a national organization as well as a local organization. There are some of our members here tonight. I see Maureen, Karen taking pictures. Mechanics Institute has a special place in my heart, and because we're both, I'd say, more older organizations. We have been around for 100 years, and we have a rich history of advocating for women authors, booksellers, librarians, and those involved in all aspects of publishing. Our organization started before women had the right to vote, and around 1917. And many of the women that started our organization and continue, there's another one of our past presidents walking in the door, Kate Farrell. They weren't always welcome in the literary world. We also say WNBA, and if you think we're talking about basketball, we say books, not balls. Okay. So I was previously the president of San Francisco chapter, and our chapter was founded by the pioneering librarian Effie Lee Morris. And she was an amazing woman. She was the first female to serve as a specialist for the Library of Congress, the first African-American president of the public library. She's in the California Library Hall of Fame. Oh, I didn't know they had a Librarian Hall of Fame, but they do. Kate Farrell's also a librarian, so she can tell you about that. And she just did so much. She was committed to literacy for children, and especially in underserved communities. And she particularly brought books to children that learned differently and that were differently able. So this was, back, she started the chapter in 1967, so she was a pioneer in many ways. We offer now a wide range of programs for budding authors, writers, and we also have literary events. We have a lot of Zoom events across the country, so some of them you can attend because a lot of things are on Zoom, and we do local events with Mechanics Institute Library. And our big fundraiser is Pitch-A-Rama, which is a pitching fest where you can pitch your book ideas, even if they're just a twinkle in your eye. It's a great time to start to publishers and literary agents. So if you want to find out more about that, talk to me or Karen. We have a little mailing list if you want to sign up. And without further ado, talk to anybody here about being a member. And this is going to be a great program. So I'm very excited. I'm going to turn the mic over to our esteemed board member, Ellen McBarnett. And here she is.
Thanks so much. Hello, all, and welcome. Thank you for coming to this gorgeous building and this gorgeous space. Thank you, Mechanics Institute, for us probably more than you were thinking about before that question. Remember that when you're talking about worlds, you're talking about perspectives. And as you leave home and you parent, imagine, or husband, wife, or you have a role at home, and you enter into your work world. And then as you leave your work world, and maybe you have the time to go to your hobbies, or your soccer team, or your workout locations, and that's a world there. And then even when you come home and pick up a book, you've ventured into yet another world. So these are three women and the fourth who love to play with worlds, building worlds within those books that you read. I'm going to introduce first Sheila. I'm not going to go into all the awards these people have, but they have a lot. And so I'm going to ask her about her activities here in San Francisco. And more specifically, what does world building mean to you, Sheila? And by the way, Sheila's full name is Sheila Speculative. Sheila Speculative.
Thank you, Ellen. And you can't get Smith McCoy together, otherwise I think you're thinking about somebody who used to be married to my ex-husband. And that's not it. I've been a part of many worlds since I came to the West Coast. Landed first in Oakland, which is a world of its own, and then over to San Francisco, a whole different world. And now I'm down on the peninsula in Menlo Park, again, a whole different world. And all of those are much different from the world in which I grew up in the segregated South. I'll date myself for you, I'm 66 years old, so I remember some things. And just to put it in perspective, I went through two school desegregations. And we like to pretend that our conversations about race are over, but they're really only just begun. I'm also in the world of being a recovering academic. I'm a part of the WNBA, and I've been a long-term member of the Carolina African American Writers Collective, which is about 27 years old and founded in Raleigh, North Carolina. So for me, world building is a dense and imaginative endeavor. In many ways, it resembles our own world, but it takes those detours and allows us to think more deeply about our own experiences, and most importantly, to enable us to think more differently about the experiences of others. My world building, I do in poetry, but also in speculative fiction. And I find that I twist the current world in ways that seem so familiar that by the time I've tricked you into going into the other world, we're all in.
By the way, each of us will be doing a little bit of reading. I know time-wise we do so much more, but a little bit of reading. But I want to get some things about the world building for us. Mary, I want to say welcome to Mary McKay. You were actually the first of this group that I am meeting here today. Everyone else I know a little tiny bit about. I just found out that you are a New York Times bestseller. Right? Tell us a little bit about your role in San Francisco and your world building.
I came to San Francisco in 1970. I live in Berkeley. So I've seen it go through a lot of changes. There were no tall buildings when I came here. Now there are. Yeah. Before BART, all that stuff. So I have kind of personal history with it. I love the Bay Area. I also taught at Cal State Sacramento for a long time. I'm also a recovering academic. And yeah, it takes a while, yeah. When I build works, I write historical fiction primarily. I'm a poet, I'm also a screenwriter, but I also write mainly historical fiction in my novels. And I build worlds in two ways, by doing really meticulous research so that history that you get out of in historical fiction is accurate. I want that to be that way. But I also fill in the blanks with imagination. And tonight I will read you something from a series of mine called the Earth Song series. It takes place 6,000 years ago. And it's about the goddess worshipping, earth worshipping cultures of Europe on the edge of a great invasion from the steppes by horse riding nomads who are going to introduce the horse for the first time and really change the world and also change it's one of the great turning points of Western society because of the way things spread, partly the world too. They are a patriarchal sun-worshipping religion, and they have a concept of property, and they treat women very badly. You find women strangled in the graves of the big men. So, and they come into a culture that is a partnership culture, as far as we can tell from the great goods, and that's the subject of the book. And you know, of course, it has plot, it has characters, and I think one thing that world building does when it does its best is you don't just see that world, you live in it. You don't. It's not like TV. It's not like movies. You're in the head of somebody. You smell it, you taste it, you go through it, you experience the emotions of it. You see temples that haven't existed for 6,000 years, which I've reproduced as well as I can, where you see, priestesses making offerings to a snake goddess with, cloaks woven in thousands of flowers. You see all these things, and you're part of it, and you smell the flowers, and you see the trade. And I thought, by the way, one kind of extra thing, before I started writing these books, I thought it was like Planet of the Cave Bear 6,000 years ago, and it's not true. They had trade, they had pottery, they had religion, they had statues, they even had some very large cities in what's now Moldova, up north. And that all changes when the horse is introduced. It's like the atomic bomb. It's a vast change that comes over Europe. And so I love building worlds, I love taking history and making it come alive, and I keep doing the research, so maybe I'm not totally recovered.
Very exciting, and it's so great to hear about the importance of books as a way of conveying sensory perception. Movies can't do that. They try. Really try. There's nothing like a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to introduce Vanessa, and I'm hesitating because I know that there are so many different faces that I've seen you here in San Francisco on screen, on the little Zoom calls. Which one of the many organizations that you are involved in, literary organizations you're involved in, would you like to tell us about? And also tell us about your work building.
Well, of course, I have to mention WNBA because that's how we met through Picturama. We met in a Picturama session, and then we met again in another Picturama session. Like, not that next year, but the year after that, we're like, on Zoom. And it's really funny in Zoom to be pointing across the virtual room and saying, I know you, do you remember me? That was kind of significant because in between those times I had joined the WNBA, and so, I was feeling a little bit more connected to that world. I came out to California as a young engineer going to graduate school to become a really academically minded engineer. And that all began from being in middle school and being in the library world, where you start at one end of the shelf that says science fiction and fantasy, and you go to the end, and you go to the end of the next shelf until you run out of books, and you send your dad to the adult side of the library to get you some more books, please. Because I was going to be the spaceship engineer, right? So I went to engineering school, and then I learned about economics and energy, and I ended up becoming an energy engineer instead of a spaceship engineer, but that's okay. We have spaceship engineers. I know spaceship engineers, so I can check that box, more or less. But it took me a lot of years to get to the point where I could start writing my own stories. And for me, world building is more about finding a place for the characters that are in my head to live. I will meet somebody and I'll go, I need, this person is a wonderful person. This person can inspire a character. This little kid here was inspired by a mother and child that I met at a convention one year. And they were just so charming, the way they were connected, and the way the mother understood the child was gender fluid. So, and the mother was just like, okay, this year she's she, the last year he was he, and that's fine, because this is a growing child, and I'm going to support my child however. So I had these people in my head, and I said, well, where can I have a story for them? And I had to carry that story in my head until I found a place for them. And it was so exciting when some friends and I put together a place where we could tell stories that were set in outer space, that featured aliens, and where we could tell stories about people of our current time
with a little bit of distancing, so we could fool some people who don't know about some things that San Franciscans are all totally comfortable with, and let them go on an adventure with a young alien and their mom, and meet another alien, and get lost in a space station, and find themselves. So, but it took, close to 10 years for me to find the place for the characters to be. So for me, it's the characters appear first in my head, and then I need a place for them to be, and I'm willing to work really hard to give them a place to live.
I love that. Thank you. And sorry, I should have said your name.
It's really, our names are, we have 2 hyphenates in the group.
Definitely a syllable for my last name. Yes.
Yes.
So very much thankfully.
And we want to introduce Ellen McFarland.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm newbie in San Francisco. I've only been here 7 years. I followed my sister out here, and she made it look great and easy. Before I came out here, I mostly wrote nonfiction, and I wrote also a lot of my work, and I worked in constitutional law and civil rights as a lobbyist. And I've always loved science fiction. I went through a period in junior high when I kind of woke up to the fact that almost all of the science fiction that was easily available was written by men.
Mm-hmm.
And it pissed me off at the time. And so I made a point of reading exclusively female science fiction writers for years. And it was how I met Ursula Le Guin, it's how I met Octavia Butler, and Patricia Philip, and lots of other great fantasy writers and sci-fi writers. When I came out here, and I missed the type of work you do when you do legislative affairs, you're imagining worlds when you're writing law. You're imagining what will change and how will things improve. Utopias and dystopias, certainly. And I found myself writing them, kind of excising them out of my dreams. And COVID hit, and I started actually getting them published because it was like paper in time, and thank God I had that during that dark time. But also during that dark time, I had not only but the Afro-Surreal Writers Workshop, Oakland, and it's a group of speculative fiction writers, poets, and memoir writers, and it's growing into the whole state of California, so you will hear more about that in the near future. So reading, I'm so excited to hear what order should we begin? Should we keep going? Sheila.
So I bought this book for you to sell, to buy. It's a poetry collection, but you'll find that I tackle many of the same issues and build new worlds in this as well. And I'm about to show you a treat. I'm gonna need, I don't know if you know the Twilight Zone episode where the aliens have come and one of them has 3 arms and again 2 sets of arms. I need that. This is a story for which I got my very first illustration. This is the illustration. This book is one of only 500, so it's a collector's edition now, from a zine called Infinite Worlds that includes lovely illustrations, individual pieces. This story is called Down Deep in Space, and it starts out with a musician who is having a very difficult time. He's thought over and over again about the best ways to end his life, and he's trying to figure out if this is something he's going to do. And he's a lover of jazz music. And we meet him at a particularly low time in his life. And we find him going out into the water and tackling that. So that catches you up to where we are. The steady kicking of his feet matched his arm strokes. He turned and breathed under his arm, every fourth stroke keeping up the pretense of living. Everything in his life depended on understanding rhythms. Paul allowed himself to believe that he was part of the cold, mystic rhythms of the Pacific. He changed directions and swam parallel to the shore, He didn't want to freak anybody out who might have watched his steady progress into the water. Paul decided he would swim away from the lights, the restaurants, of the shore, and wait until he was just bobbing something or another in the ocean. Nothing connected to life to arouse the interest of anyone watching from the shore. He stopped swimming and turned on his back, floating and hoping. The music that was always in his head took over, his favorite alternative to reality. He heard the bridge of the slide of the Family Stone song when Cynthia Robinson's trumpet melodies broke through the rest of the band. Edward Wilkinson's saxophone cut in from somewhere. He couldn't remember the title of the song just then. He had heard Wilkinson's band play that song at Hot House in Chicago. He could feel that music reaching inside of him. He was startled when he saw the first fin in the water near him. A little piece of him died as he stopped swimming. Before he realized that there were 3 dolphins in the water. They were swimming too close. So he turned to swim back towards the shore, content to be out of their way, until one of them spoke. Yo, dude, where are you going? The dolphins closest to him said, his voice was smooth. Just over there, Paul said, and he started swimming hard towards the shore. The dolphins, though, with their perfectly proportioned bodies, came with him, getting in the way of his 4-stroke breathing rhythm. Their antecedents, the dolphin's voice was different from the others. The words whistled into his consciousness. What the fuck? Paul managed to say. He completely stopped swimming. He looked at the 3rd dolphin, who smiled without saying anything. There are ways to get you into the right, shall I say, mind space, the 1st dolphin spoke again. We have the basic diagnosis of your problem, Paul, though we may not agree. You're in the wrong space here, brother, the 2nd one listened. He was treading water, watching the dolphins swim away. He heard them laughing when the light started. Each beam of light was a different kind of blue. The water around him glowed brightly. He could see all the way to the bottom, the small fish quickly swimming under him, the sand shifting with every push of every wave. He could clearly discern the patterns of every wave that was generated and the wave of each of the dolphins' tails as they swam back and leapt back into the heart of the ocean. With the flashing beam of every light, Eva was lifted higher and higher out of the water. He had no idea what was happening to him. Then he found himself face to face with a man playing various saxophones and flutes at the same time, with 3 extending from his mouth and 1 in his nose. He stopped his circular breathing long enough to welcome Paul on board. What's up, Paul? I'm Rashawn. Prepare yourself for the airport, man. By the way, that's a funky outfit. I like your solo, man. That funky jazz mix was perfect. It's not like something you hear much from Plantation Earth. Paul could not find anything to say. Rashawn Roland Kirk had died in 1977 when Paul was just 4 years old. All of a sudden, he felt his trumpet in his hand, which made him feel more comfortable. Mr. Kirk, it's good to meet you. It's cool, brother. Welcome to this many-sided dream. It's just our way of reprogramming you in the natural vibrations of music. Let me introduce you to the band. And what follows is a series of sticky events that gets us to the next step. Now, if I have time at the end, I'll come back and
I should mention for the benefit of the audience, if you have questions or discussion, we're going to try and get a little time at the end to do that. So, hold those questions, think about it. We'll get back. And what are you reading from?
I'm reading from The Village of Bones. It's the prequel to my trilogy, The Year the Horses Came, The Horses Escaped, and The Fires of Spring. Takes place in Europe 6,000 years ago. Perfect example of using history and filling in the blanks. All the cities I describe, even the appearance of certain things you'll see, are all as accurate as I can make them from archaeology and paleontology. But you'll see I'm filling, you don't know the religious rituals of these people. They didn't have writing. You don't know their songs. You don't know their poetry. So I get to be the god of all that. I get to figure out what it actually looks like. And that's one of the things really that I like about this. It's also quite possible this is going to be a movie. They've already got scripts and people working on it. If it is, and sometimes these things don't come through, it'll be filmed in Romania, which is the site of this book.
I'm going to interrupt you and insist that you start reading right now.
And I'm reading, ooh, this can't be coast of the Black Sea, 4387 BCE. Sabala dug her paddle into the water and raced toward shore. Her arms were burning, her shift was soaked with sweat, and her breath was coming in gasps. She paddled with all her strength, not daring to look over her shoulder. She had to go faster or she wasn't going to make it. 21 seasons old and barren, the midwives had said. What a fool she'd been to try to run away from their words. But how could she have known? She'd gone down to the wharf this morning in a defiant mood, and now she was paying the price. When she set out, the sun had been shining, and the Sweetwater City had been as calm as a lake. In front of her, sunlight still lay on the water in big golden puddles. Beyond it, the city of Shara rose up white and lovely, its 20 temples and 100 mother houses perched along the south bank of the river like a flock of doves. As far as she could tell, nobody in the city had noticed the approaching storm yet. Why should they? There was no need to keep watch on the sea. This wasn't storm season, and the city had never been attacked or invaded as long as anyone could remember. Dear God, as she prayed, please let me get to safety before the wind hits. The instant the words formed in her mind, the sun went out like a lamp, the air turned green, great black clouds boiled over her, and bolts of lightning flashed so close the mast of the boat seemed to jump sideways. Looking over her shoulder, she saw a giant wall of water higher than the walls of the city had risen out of the sea. Above it, there was nothing but churning darkness. As the darkness engulfed her, the boat bucked and rose out of the water like a kite, and then everything was water, fury, salt, terror, and drowning. Then the next thing she knew, she was being sucked up back toward the surface through a tube of churning foam. As her head broke out of the water, her right hand struck something solid. Grabbing for it, she found herself clutching the broken mast of the boat. As she lay on the mast, panting and gasping, the storm suddenly stopped. Not all of it, just the part that was raging around her. Within a space, about the size of a temple floor, the wind had died down completely. And when she looked outside that circle of peace, she could see the storm still beating its way toward her. Cold as fear, she took a deep breath. As she lay there, giving into the sobbing that had been bubbling up in her throat ever since the boat capsized, a woman emerged from the wall of crashing waves and walked across the sea toward her. Sabala abruptly stopped crying and stared at the woman stunned. This was impossible. She had to be dreaming. The woman kept walking, stepping over the waves as if they were furrows in a field of wheat. Her flowing dress was as blue as the summer sea, her hair long and green, twined with seaweed and pearls. Her skin was dark and light at the same time, her eyes so bright they glowed like the last flash of the sun when it falls into the sea in midsummer. Sabala closed her eyes and clung to the mast, trembling. Was she going mad? Was she dead after all? A sweet scent suddenly filled the air like the perfume of roses blown across water. Don't be afraid, the woman said. I'll do you no harm. Open your eyes and look at me. I'm afraid if I look in your face, I'll die, Sabala whispered. Nonsense, the woman said, with a touch of impatience that reminded Sabala of her mother. Open your eyes right now. Sabala opened her eyes and saw the woman was standing on the water so close to the mast that the hem of her robe was touching it. Repressing an urge to scream in terror, she summoned her courage. Who are you? How can you walk on water? You don't recognize me? The woman's laughter was like the sound of a wind chime. I'm Amanah, goddess of the sea, and water is my path. I can walk above it or beneath it as I wish. I have news for you that will bring you great joy. You're going to bear a magical child. But I can't. I'm barren. The word barren was bitter in Sabala's mouth. Not anymore, Amanah said. Leaning over, she gave Sabala a kiss on the cheek. At the touch of the goddess's lips, Sabala felt her womb leap in joy. Rise up, Amanah, against her in the water. She was fading now, becoming transparent. Wait, Sabala cried. Please don't go. Tell me who the father of my baby will be. How will I find him? Don't worry. The father of your baby will find you. Amanah was fading fast. By now, Sabala could see through her body. Wait, dear goddess, will my baby be a boy or a girl? How will my child be magical? Will she be a great priestess, a queen of Shara, a seer? There are some things you're better off not knowing. Amanah waved her hand, and a school of dolphins rose out of the water and surrounded the mast. You must go back to Shara now. My dolphin children will see you safely to shore. As Amanah disappeared, there was a crash of thunder, and the storm closed back over Sabala. A huge wave smashed into the mast, sending her straight up into the air and tossing her back into the sea. But this time she didn't sink, because the dolphins surrounded her and bore her up all the way to shore. Staggering through the surf to the beach, Sabala took a few steps forward and fell face forward in the sand.
fun spot that's,
And this is the name of
the name of this book is The Smugglers, which is unfortunate for me. There's a lot of books on Amazon named The Smugglers. I'm sorry, but it's appropriate. They are, in fact, smugglers. I lost the spot. I didn't say it. Okay. I don't think there's much interest in it. I told you they're aliens, and they're on their way to the truck stop at the center of the galaxy. For the final approach run, Boy chose the widest of the view screens and stretched one pair of his fronds around the perimeter, taking possession of the wonderful sight. The tingling of etheric energy flowing through the conduits that served the sensor arrays added an edge to his excitement. Mama had installed these ancient tech devices a year ago, and they still surprised him with new capabilities. This time, they could watch every moment of their flight into the galactic core. So many stars! Mama, have they put all the stars in the galaxy here? Mother laughed at the joke, and his featherings rippled with joy. She stood at the controls, guiding the processes that controlled the ship. She told Boy she planned a route that would make the journey worth their while. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience arriving at this vast ocean of radiation and gravity. The flicker of data across the top of the panel let him know just how much the shielding had to screen the light, dimming what must be an impossibly brilliant sky if one dared to look at it with natural eyes. Thousands of stars, no, millions, danced in their orbits. They all seemed so close to one another, he expected at any moment to see the flare of a stellar collision. He flicked a finger over the controls, triggering layers in the display that tagged each star by type, age, mass, velocity, and luminosity. By extending all his eyes, he could sample all the flavors of starlight, from deep ultraviolets to brilliant infrareds. The layers of color blended to a swirling sea, oh, there's a sea in here, of energy. It's like a snowstorm, a storm of light, like on Calabax. Remember, Mama? She made a low hum of agreement, then called out, "Shields?" Boy already had one eye on the shield monitors. Mother had promised they'd be safe, but something told him there should be more than one person keeping watch on their safety. "Shields holding," he reported, feeling more grown up than ever before. The lower half of the monitor filled with a glowing red-orange disk. "Look," he cried, "it's an ocean in space." "The accretion disk, yes," she replied. "I know," he grumbled. He'd studied that portion of his lessons thoroughly. At the center of that immense platter lay the black hole itself. The reason this is a safe place for the station is that this black hole spins slowly, so it doesn't make jets like other galactic black holes. "Oh, is that so?" This time he heard the spark-like clatter of pride in her voice. "Now look, do you see the station?" He added the filter for reflective objects. Yes, there it was, silhouetted against the glow of the accretion disk. Two rings, one tucked inside the other, spokes running straight from the hub to the outermost ring, the whole spinning against the backdrop of the accretion disk's glow. No, wait, there was a third narrow ring at the rim. "Is that where we dock, on the outer ring?" "Yes, that's right. Better go get your skin suit out, Boy. We'll be there soon." He tore his gaze from the wonderful view, but not before checking to be sure the view screen was recording. "Mama, did you remember to install the devices in the skin suits?" She murmured yes, and flicked her fronds at him in approving dismissal. Humans used electronic devices implanted in their skin, mostly to communicate. Darabon technology made those devices more powerful, but the humans would never know. Boy loved that feeling, holding a secret in plain sight. He ran to the lockers and pulled out the skin suits. The big one looked like a human woman with plain, unfeathered, copper brown skin and long hair that flowed like an amber waterfall when Mama walked around in it. The little one had short, black hair with no curliness to it and wide, innocent eyes that he could look through with his real eyes to see far more than any human child could see. He had fun wearing it, but it was getting to be too small. Never mind, Mama says, this is the last time we'll use them.
I'll go next, and last of the readings, unfortunately. We've got some great stuff to do. This is from Midnight in Indigo, Volume 2, Speculative Fiction, and this is the beginning of my story, Negrita. I need my glasses. On a bright summer day in the 6th month of the year, 1650, she awoke in chains as bilge water sloshed over her nakedness. The stench of exodus filled the air and the sound of grudging, coughing, moans and sobs never stopped. She lay supine, crowded by co-captives, chained at her head, feet, and on either side, on a rough wood platform. The ship was stuffed, stem to stern, with suffering humanity. The young one closed her eyes and said, "Mother, thank you." She rolled to her right side and pulled close to the back of her neighbor, a very young woman who had been sobbing every waking hour of the voyage thus far. This one had smooth, rounded hips, a tiny waist, and a dense pattern of small raised scars encircling her torso. Pulling as close as the chains would allow, the young one slipped her hands around the sobbing girl's waist and pressed them over her panicked heart. She pulled the girl against her own breasts, pressed her cheek against the girl's neck, and breathed softly and slowly into her ear. The sobbing quieted, and the girl whispered a few words in a tone of gratitude in a language unknown. Their breathing synced, and then the girl slowed into sleep. Soon it stopped entirely. Another light convulsed. Misery flowed above and below the deck. Bodies were tossed like breadcrumbs in the ship's wake, a trail none aboard would follow home. The sailor who had struck the young one unconscious when she spurned him was among the first above deck to go, as disease raged, and few resisted. The young one's kind did not suffer human frailty, so she feigned weakness when in sunlight. In the obscuring dark below deck, she would smile and hum in delight, her joy taken for madness by those around her. The cargo would blame luck, filth, and the curses of mysterious enemies. The crew would blame poor food, evil eye, and ill winds drawn at the fault of the captain. The captain would blame shoddy merchandise and rough seas. The ship's investors would rate the loss of more than half the merchandise a financial disaster. They would fire the captain and eventually go bankrupt. None suspected her role. That was the great skill of her kind, not being suspected. At the first port in the New World, the young one was led off the ship, chained among the survivors. She was careful to mind their shame, fear, and anguish, blinking against the sun's rays and trying to cover her nakedness. Her legs quickly became accustomed to the first piece of solid ground in weeks, but she hid her strength. Even so, she was sold to a shrewd planter whose overseer, hard to see the clock, at the same time, okay. Whose overseer examined her good teeth, strong hands, and clear eyes, and declared her fit for their purposes. The planter bought half of the remaining cargo, never suspecting his mistake. Cuba, Cana de Azúcar, Machete, Las Alba, in other words, became part of her first language. She had never needed to speak before. Very young for her species, this was her first time away from her mother. She could see why in her wisdom. The ancient one who birthed her had chosen this life for her and had suggested this husk for her to hide among them. The young of her species are ravenous. They require 1,000 times the sustenance of the old. This new world was a cornmeal coconut. She would bless her mother daily. The plantation owner would curse his luck daily. His females were barren and his males impotent. They would die in the fields so quickly that he would use their corpses for fertilizer for the sugarcane. His saving grace was the demand for sugar from his Dutch clients and the thirst for rum in the New Amsterdam on the Hudson. Whether his chattel died from heat, disease, or overwork, it did not matter. Profit ruled, money came in. He replaced the dead with new live bodies every time a white bride from Spain to marry their Spanish sons. She arrived at the slave port draped in chains of gold and pearls, but her silk slippers were no match for the stones of this new world. The heat and the stench nearly killed her outright. She bore the weight of 4 layers of silk undergarments, each lovingly sewn by devout nuns and freezing alpine alleys. The trappings of her European upbringing were necessary, since without them, she was no different from the bodies of women in the fields. The planter had built for her a mansion, and had built for them hovels, but he had the power of life and death over all. The bride's misery tasted light, cool, and crisp to the young one. She would sit outside the mansion in the pre-dawn hours and feed while the sleepless bride ran the hallways in her nightgown, opening and slamming doors. Perhaps it was the whispers in strange languages, or the frightened glances from all the mistress encountered. Maybe it was the press of tortured souls or loneliness, but it was not she who drove the planter's young wife down. The wife's ship back to Europe was sunk by British pirates seeking gold. They had no interest in high maintenance aristocratic wives. The planter's heartbreak was delicious. We have a couple minutes to ask questions amongst each other. Have you questions about writing and publishing and that sort of thing? I mean, I know that. I don't know what it's like to have been your bestseller.
Well, it's better than not being. And that was a novel I did about 3 generations of women involved in ballet, starting in Tsarist Russia. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. It's good because it's always very hard to get published, particularly for women at the time. And once that happens to you, it's easier. So that's a good thing. But it's not a guarantee. And I mean, I had 14 novels published, but I've written 19, so it's 5 I can only be published. So it's just, it's always luck of the draw each time. Don't get discouraged if you're out there getting rejection. Some of the greatest writers in the world they can get published in their own lifetime. So just remember that, and remember that possibly you're the greatest writer in the world. I think that's important.
And I have a question for you. I read your story when Midnight Indigo came out. What was it like to be in community with other BIPOC writers in this particular issue?
Well, I was already writing with the other school writers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the first versions of this particular story were seen by that group. And having folks who I can talk to about, well, I realize that y'all haven't read the stories, so that's why. Negrita, the young one, she was the name Negrita, she travels, she's very long-lived, so she travels across different cultures of Americans through, she travels on the Trail of Tears. She ends up in 1970s New York during the time period when I guess it was Ford told the city to drop it. I don't know that headline, it was great. So yeah, I guess the answer is it felt very comfortable.
I ask you a question. This is skin suits. I love those. Are there more of them in the novel? Do you have more skin suits there?
Well, there is one more. There's a baby skin suit.
I see.
Yes, because there's a third extremely dangerous alien involved in the story.
Do they zip up the back or have Velcro?
They have little seals that can be cleverly unsealed, and sometimes should not be unsealed.
I love the concept.
It's a fun little sci-fi trope, and we have the story that there are aliens living in the Congress that are really reptilians and they wear skin suits and pretend to be humans. It's always fun to riff off silly things and turn them into a story. Great.
written in the vein of where they are. That filters in wherever you are, but as an academic and as a scholar, I have focused on all the isms and racism and ending and recreating different ways of knowledge streams that go back to ancient Africa. So I write that in the present tense wherever I am, so it filters in. This story actually was written in Georgia during a time where I was very focused on jazz and jazz as a medium of expression. And so you will find not only Rashawn Roland Kirk, who was a wonderful musician and visionary, but Liz Gillespie and Miles Davis and Mel Liston, who is Californian, but was she was a prodigy on the saxophone from the age of 7. And if you don't know her work, you should look her up. Melba Liston. Yeah.
What's the name?
Melba Liston, Liston. Yes.
I know you all have questions and walk up my breath in just a little bit. I did want to ask one last question from panelists, unless other, well, one last question from me and others have last questions. Do you share your work with other writers before you seek publication?
Yes. Yes. Well, the main value I get from it is that it's not so much, can you critique my grammar? I'm really good at grammar. But can you tell me what I've forgotten in this story? Is there somebody's perspective that I've gotten wrong? Have I overdone it? Does the joke not land? Which you can only get from somebody else. You can't get it from yourself, because when you read it yourself, it's like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. This little story, I left out an important scene. And one of the people in the East Bay science fiction and fantasy writer said, you've left out this scene. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right.
I was shocked recently to find out that Toni Morrison didn't approve of that. She didn't show her work to others other than her editor, which was very bad.
I don't show my poetry to other people, but I show my novels, and it's very helpful. The problem is when I've written something, I see all the changes I've made, like a ghost novel, a capital novel, and I can't see it like the readers are going to see it. I need somebody else to read it without knowing what came before. It's really important for me, because otherwise I just can't get a feel for what I need to do to it.
I share with other writers, but I also share with readers, because it's important it's not going to find its audience until it's out there, so it's important to get that feedback right away. And then there's some things I just don't share, and let it be a surprise.
It's also fun to take work you're currently working on and take it to an open mic kind of environment, and just read it aloud to people and kind of watch the reactions. And
They don't throw tomatoes.
No, everybody is not. This is at least around.
I don't think that mic is on.
It's not on it? Oh. It's not on it?
It's not, but you need to hold it closer.
Oh, okay, I knew that at least one of the mics was like this. Hold this mic very close to your mouth.
You mean like this?
Exactly.
It's skilled microphone user.
Like this? Test, there we go. You mean like this? It's all incredible and wonderful work, and thank you so much. I do have a question. Just caught me. You weave this wonderful, wonderful story, and this woman walking across the water, and I'm just the anticipation of them connecting. And I'm just curious. For me, I just had this anticipation of however they were going to connect. That it would be, it's wonderful. I'm just wondering why you had her kiss her on the cheek and not on the lips.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wanted it to be a non-sexual kiss. I wanted it to be a kiss of, it's a kiss from the goddess. It's a kiss of pure love without, not sex isn't pure. Believe me, I went to San Francisco, okay? But just the idea of it just being kind of a divine kind of, thing where she comes up and she's both sisterly, she's motherly, she's loving, and she's the goddess of the sea.
Gotcha.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
Questions, definitely raise the arms. They won't be able to see. I have a question about agents and publications. I've been told by a friend who is a writer, and pretty well published, and she's mostly self-published, but she also has had stuff in anthologies. Award winner. But she has come to distrust agents for some reason. As she feels that she is the bestseller of her work in this day and age. I was wondering for those who work with agents, what great experiences have you had? And for those who don't work with agents, why do you choose something?
Well, I guess I could sort of dive in. I've tried to work with agents. If anybody has done this, you query, you write a letter to all the agents in the universe, and you send them samples or whatever they ask for. And I finally came to the realization that my writing is a little bit too non-traditional, in the sense that it doesn't meet, I can't liken it exactly to something that just came out from a major publisher. And I realized that I have a wonderful relationship with a small press traditional publisher right here in the Bay Area who likes my work and will support it. And I'm like, well, what am I thinking? I don't need an agent. I have a circle of friends at the publishing house. And also, and among those friends are people who know how to self-publish. And if there are books that I want to self-publish, I have a resource. I have people I can turn to help me do that. And also, like certain other people in this group, I'm of a certain age. And work with an agent, it takes 1 to 4 years to find an agent. And then it'll take 1 to 4 years for that agent to sell your book. And then it'll take 1 to 4 years for the publisher to produce that book, because the big presses are very slow. Small presses are, by and large, more nimble, and they get a book out in a year instead of in 5 years. I'm getting impatient.
I've always had an agent. I started out in the women's movement out here very early, 1970, and I was published, my first novel was published by Shameless Hussy Press, which was a wonderful woman named Alta, who just died lately. And I like to say, I started out as a shameless hussy and just kept it up. But what that did was there was a whole circle of women, and we started reinventing it because there were not women's presses. There were, all the publishers were male, pretty much all of the agents were and everything. And then I just had, one of these women who'd been a lawyer, she was a lawyer, she said, I'm going to go into entertainment law and become an agent. So she became my first agent. And she sold my first book, McCarthy's List, which is a comedy parody of McCarthyism. And then what happened was I knew her friends and stuff. And one day I was sitting in a hot tub with a bunch of people and met somebody else, and kind of connections like that. That first agent went actually to find her bliss with Mukhananda, so she could make me do it instead of selling my second book. But she turned me over to a great agent in New York named Barbara Lowenstein. I had her forever. I still have her. And she was like a great white shark. She would walk in there and she would just get your book sold. And she was a wonderful agent. She's retired now, and now she's given me another agent. But I found it to be very helpful, particularly with negotiations and contracts, which I'm not capable of doing. And in those days, if you didn't live in New York, you had to have a representative there. I wrote a novel about wildfires in California in 1986, and the New York editor said, "Who cares about California?"
Wow. I come to my creative work as a part-time kid, because as an academic, use academic press, it's not unusual to be unagented in those things. And so I have 6 previous books to the poetry collection that just came out of academic publications. I do have good friends who love their agents. I have good friends who fired their agents. I have good friends who are in the process of firing their agents. And I think about being agented like I think about winning the lottery. One day, it will happen, and it'll be fun.
Right.
Well, one thing I've noticed, and because I just went through the querying process, is that one thing that has changed is that a lot of agents are women, so that's good. But they are so overworked, they are inundated, they have no time, they don't, In the lower level people, there are a lot, in publishing, there are a lot of women working there, but they, again, are overworked and they have no time and they, you know, and they're not paid well. And I almost feel bad feeding into that system because it feels like it's abusive.
I get that. I'm talking to foreign hospital agents, and it's a wonderful position to be in these conversations, but I'm not feeling very enthused because I write a lot of different things. I am working on a cookbook. I'm also working on what an anthology and my novel. And the agents I'm talking to are interested in one or the other.
They want you to fit very neatly into a box,
I
and
see
that's very
that.
hard for many of us to do.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, things have changed a great deal. It's much harder. You used to have to do your own publicity now if you're a writer. They used to give you a publicist, all sorts of stuff. So people are being overworked. I think in all fields, actually. It's not like the internet has helped people work less. It's made it 24 hours a day. Even if you're working at home, you're living at work.
Great quote, by the way.
My question is going back to world building, and I'm wondering, anyone can take this question or all, when does the world take over your world that you've created? And I'd love to hear some example of like you were writing, or because you're immersed in it when you're writing. It's not just when you've got your fingers on the keyboard or your hand with the pen. When did your world take over and tell you something that was going to happen, or a character took over? I love this. Yeah, that's what I'd love to hear.
You have Nancy first,
Well, it's because it's an embarrassing answer. I love short stories and love writing short stories, and I sometimes dream from a story. And one of my favorite stories that's not yet published came almost entirely in a dream that was actually a nightmare. That as I woke up, I thought, okay, then I gotta make this better. So it frightened me, and I was able to improve it, though I don't know that my improvements would not frighten other people. So yeah, I guess the worlds that you build may be existing in your subconscious at all times, and when it pops up, might be in situations like that. Or another good example is I wrote a story and showed it to some friends. I think it was the East Bay side. And the concern was that they didn't show the character's personality, why she was the way she was. And as I wrote another scene to explain her world, I realized that she lived in my world, very decidedly in more ways than I used to be. And it was kind of scary thing. So, yeah, those are my 2 cents.
I intentionally enter my worlds. When I'm writing, I will close my eyes and I will run the novel as a movie into my head. I will sit down and I will I don't think I'm channeling anything, but I will summon up the characters and I will talk to them and I will get them to talk to me. And once they talk to me, then I can, I write charts with all my characters with everything about them that I know, sort of like an FBI report on your character, everything from weight and eyes to enemies and scars and, history. And I really go into that world. And then when I'm writing, I'm totally immersed. But sometimes I notice the outside world, and I've noticed that if my character starts getting hungry, and she's hungry, she's very hungry, or if he's very hungry, I have to eat lunch.
Inspired by your characters to take care of yourself.
Right.
I think the place where the books tend to take over is when I meet a character that I can't let go of. and sometimes they'll emerge from the world. You know, there's a character in my duology who was just supposed to be a foil, a person they met, a guide that showed them from one place to another, and they were exploring, and I was enjoying building the geography and being inspired by real geography. I like to Google Earth and go, okay, we're gonna like this, and then this could be a lake here, and this would be cool, you know. And then this young person just kind of walked in and took over, you know, and you know, she sat down to talk to the boss, and the boss says, okay, young lady, you need to tell me where the thing is. She said, no, I'm a man. And he's like, now you're a girl, you're obviously a girl. You know, no, I'm a man. Okay, well then, boy, no, I'm a man. And it's like, and this character just moved in and just took over and became an integral part of the book and became a part of the family of the main character and went all the way into the second book and played a significant role there. And they were just supposed to be a person they met at an inn and gave them directions. So they're a very significant person. So I admire them greatly.
They overstep.
Yeah.
I was a scholar of literature in my other life, and I vividly remember Alice Walker talking about the characters of The Color Purple when they came and when to go and what they were doing. I did an interview, published interview with Will Clegg, who's an Atlanta-based writer. She's been on the bestseller list as well. And she said she was driving in the terrible traffic in Atlanta one day, and the character spoke to her from the back seat. She almost had a wreck. And so that wasn't going to happen to me. But what they do is to show up at inconvenient times when you're working on something else, and they have something to say that you're trying to move through, or in the shower, and then you have to remember, or at a stoplight. And so I've gotten to the habit of recording things on my phone or taking notes on my phone wherever I are, because sometimes they do bleed in.
I know that we're short on time, but so you had mentioned that you had something that you wanted to share here. Well, we have
Okay. This one's a little less close to reality, which is why I wanted to share it with you. This is from a novella called Red Wings, and the realm of seven hands is defined by the beauty of the mountains, the valleys, and the one sea. One teeming with herds of impala and animals you would know or not even imagine. The realm is surrounded by seven mountains called the Hands. Our ancestors named them so because the mountains are aligned around the valley like the fingers of gigantic hands. Beyond the seven hands, the rolling plain separates the empire from the one sea, an ocean that is so large that only those with the strongest wings have ever flown far enough to see the other side. We say those things as if they still are, but we don't know what is and what was where you are. Not yet. We accept and expect multiple temporalities and possibilities, as we do many things that you might consider strange, like the births of the red wings, for instance. When they started being born into our world, the elders accepted this as a momentous time of transition in the kingdom. The first one was born near the farthest peak of the seven hands, and they continued to be born, 2 every month or so, until there were 14 of them, born in appropriately measured time that assured that they would be paired as mates according to our customs. They were all remarkable, with red feathers rimming their wings in intricate patterns against their other gold-tipped feathers. All of them have been born with a life path of 5, assuring prosperity for us. Sola Adesen, however, came into the world with a life path of 9. The elders knew that she would be the one who would bend the world to her light. So our elders watched her and discussed her often until they found a way to understand the gifts that Sola Tabi was to bring them. Sola was the last of the red wings to be born, and the only healer amongst the new ones. Her mother had terribly suffered during her birth, and while the family was waiting for her to finish dying, Sola reached out to touch her mother's face, an amber glow surrounding her, and healed her. I know this is not merely the hatching of a legend because I was there. I saw it with my own eyes and my entire beings. There were other healers in our histories, but not ones who had acquired their powers before they completed their adulthood rites. And as you follow Stola, you're gonna follow her through space and time, back to the period of enslavement, with her quest to make the world right again in a world that has been overdetermined by patriarchy.
We're almost done, and I realize I have one more question, unless someone in the audience. Oh, by the way, two questions. One for the audience. Do folks mind if we take a picture of the whole group, us and you all? Awesome, thanks. And the question was, I would love an example of a story, either your own or not your own, that you think is just exemplary of like world building, great way for a reader who has not come to world building or not thought about it as a separate task within writing, a story that would help them understand it. And I'm cheating since I thought of the question already after the example. Tell us.
Then you go first.
Lake of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, yeah. It's the Lake of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin. And it's about a man who's having nightmares, and the problem with his nightmares, we find, is he reimagines the world each time. And it works. The world is new each time he wakes up. And his poor psychologist has to figure it out. I will tell you who the bad guy is.
I would have to lean into a Californian that you all probably know and love, and that's Octavia Butler. She has one collection of short stories called Blood Child, and that title story is just beautiful to behold. But every one of those stories is like your best friend. You don't want it to end.
My mind is gone totally blank. There's a story that I always like, I think it's Highland. It's where there's a Tibetan monastery, and they go up to the monastery, and they program the first computer. This is written in the late 50s, and program the computer's going to say all the names of God, so they'll get done faster. And they program it, and when they come down to the mountain, they look up at the stars that are going out one by one.
Oh, that one.
And it's one of my absolute favorite stories, and I'm sorry I can't remember the title. But somebody
9 billion names of God.
What's it called?
Something.
That's it. It's the
9 billion names of God.
Yes, 9 billion names of God. Yeah, it's one of the best short stories I've ever read, science fiction short stories.
Well, I'm in a quandary because I was thinking Lagoon too, but I was thinking a somewhat different story. There's the Earthsea trilogy by Ursula Le Guin, which creates a wonderful world with dragons and an interesting take on magic and women and men in conflict and conflicts that never quite resolved in some cases, like real life. And she was very big on making stories that made you feel like it was a real place. And I treasure all her books, which weigh down my bookshelf crazy. And she would always, I met her a couple of times because she would come to writers' conferences and she would say, "You just have to write. Just sit down and write, for goodness sake." She had no patience with any of us.
Well, I know there were almost,
We just have time to buy books.
oh yeah, they're almost at the end. There are books to be bought, but save your seats for just a second longer. Going from Vanessa around, are there last bits that you want the audience to know about writing worlds, buying worlds, being a reader in worlds, being a writer in worlds, how to approach new worlds when you're reading them?
Well, I sort of feel like they're all, any story, you're entering a new world. I mean, every time you pick up a story, you're entering the world of the author that wrote it. Even if it's, if you're reading The Old Man and the Sea, that's a world building. For speculative fiction, it's the fun part for the author is creating the space, but sometimes we have to step back and say we want to make the reader enjoy it and not feel overwhelmed by the weird. And so we try, and feel free to tell us when we haven't succeeded.
Yeah, I think if you're writers, and I know many of you are here, it's really hard to create new worlds. And it's harder than doing historical fiction. I mean, I'm a great admirer of people that can create a complete new world. But the important thing I find in doing any of this kind of writing is you want to have all of the sense detail in there. You want to have the feeling, the taste, the wind on the skin, the rough part under the bare feet, the beating of the heart, everything in there, because that brings the body into it. And when the body comes into a story, then the person, like a skin, they inhabit the story. The reader can inhabit the story through the whole physical part. And that also, some people just concentrate on plot, but I think that plot becomes much more important than moving when it becomes a world you can actually inhabit.
I love the mix of temporal elements so that you never know what time and space you're actually in. And so I think those temporal fluxes are very important. And you notice the dolphins and the deities in our work, I lean in quite heavily to African epistemology, so West African religious traditions. So the dolphins in my story are overseen by an African female deity named Yemanya, and so she's very present there. But also Dogon philosophy, things that you don't know about. If you don't know the Dogons, they discovered Sirius B and C before we could see, astronomers could see them with telescopes. And it's been a tradition in their lives for over 6,000 years. We're still waiting to hear all their stories, and we haven't quite heard them yet. And so I try to lean into the unseen part of the world, as well as all those wonderful elements.
I think of, we're to pull religion into a conversation in San Francisco. It can go in so many different directions. I think of the phrase to be like a child when we come to religion, and it's actually a great suggestion for coming to almost anything. If you read the way you were when you were a child at your grandmother's feet, listening to the stories that she told, or the stories that your cousins told, or the stories that you heard even on the playground, the stories that you just believed right away, you didn't question it, you didn't ask, well, is it really possible for people to fly? Well, yeah, sometimes people fly. I say that in part because a lot of my influence is based on family lore that comes to us over the generations of the Caribbean. And we have magical twins, we have a woman who gave birth at the age of 63, we have all sorts of tales within our family life, and they are all true. And so the idea of coming to a new story, coming to a new novel, with skepticism, come open and free and indulge. It's a different experience. Audience, thank you.